Christian.
Rhonda.
Ezra Pound is an American poet who is now widely known as the developer of imagism, the strong correspondence between the verbal and musical qualities of a verse, the mood they express, and tight language. He is considered one of the most controversial and one of the most important contributors to modern poetry. Donald Hall, in his remarks collected in Remembering Poets, acclaims that Ezra Pound is the poet who, 1,000 times more than any other man, has made modern poetry possible in English. It is through the importance of Ezra's contributions to the arts throughout his childhood, adult life, and career that Hugh Kenner, in his groundbreaking study of the poetry of Ezra Pound, could agree that there is no contemporary writer who is less read than Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound was born October 30th, 1885 in Haley, Idaho. He was the only child of Homer and Loomis Pound, an Ecotro land officer, and his wife Isabel Weston. Together, both of Ezra's parents had ancestors in the 17th century whom immigrated from England. John Pound, on Homer's side of the family, was a Quaker who sailed from England around the 1860s. Homer's grandfather, Thaddeus Coleman Pound, was a Republican congressman involved in the lumberjack business. Homer worked for Thaddeus until he was eventually appointed as Register of the Government Land Office in Haley. On Isabel's side of the family, Ezra was descended from a Puritan immigrant, William Wadsworth, who in 1632 emigrated from England to Boston on the line. The Wadsworths married into the Westons and produced Isabel. When Ezra was just 18 months old, as Isabel was unhappy living in Idaho, she took him to go back east and was eventually followed by Homer, where in 1889 he earned a job as an assayer in the Philadelphia Mint in Pennsylvania. With time and a happy childhood, Ezra grew to be a man who was more responsible for the 20th Revolution than any other individual. Ezra's early education took place in a series of what are known as dame schools, some of which were run by Quakers. After he graduated from grade school, Ezra attended military school where he was taught the importance of authority. He was known as independent, unpopular, and conceited. By the time Ezra was 15, his aspirations for literature were grand. He knew he wanted to pursue poetry, and his parents were very supportive of this decision. I learned that at 30, I would know more about poetry than any other man living. I would know what was accounted for poetry everywhere and what part of poetry was indestructible. In 1901, he was admitted to the University of Pennsylvania College of Liberal Arts. But in 1908, when he was just 20 years old, Ezra was kicked out for resisting the philological approach of what he was being taught. He then moved to Europe, where he became consumed with passion for critical judgment. When at the literary salon in January 1909, Ezra met the novelist Olivia Shakespeare and was introduced to her daughter Dorothy. They married several years later in 1742. Together they have a son, Omar Pound. Ever the loyal son, he becomes a gifted poet and translator just like his father. Ezra's significant contributions to poetry began with his development of imagism in 1912, a movement in poetry derived from classical Japanese and Chinese poetry. It combined the creation of an image with the rigorous requirements of writing stressing clarity, precision, and the traditional rhyme and meter to create a musical phrase. It is because of this that most of his works take the form of translation, imitation, allusion, and quotation, suffused with memories and anger at the indifference of the world. Because of his aesthetic views, Ezra around controversy, never having or seeking out a wide-ranged audience, his use of unconventional poetic material and technical innovations would baffle even the most sympathetic of readers. It was his goal in life to prove that bad writing destroyed civilizations and good writing could save them, that literature could enhance the appreciation of life for everyone. In the pursuit of this goal, he gained a reputation as a member of the literary avant-garde and as a tenacious advocate for the arts. His best-known works include the Cantos, Repots, and Hugh Slain Malberley, which won him the Bellingen Prize for Poetry in 1949, all of which represent anger and depression, as this was a difficult time for Pound. and his efforts to develop new innovations for the arts, he supported and promoted writers such as James Joyce, T.S. Eliot, and Robert Frost. It is true that he is flamboyant, immodest, opinionated, tactless, a pinwheel of affection, and he made people crazy, a miracle of gusto and help. He was eventually awarded the prize for poetry in 1949. For over 50 years, Ezra continued to write poetry until he died in 1972, even though he chose to no longer speak. His works have had an enormous influence on the poetry of modern-day society. Critic David Perkins in A History of Modern Poetry summarizes the great man Pound had become. His achievement in and for poetry was threefold: as a poet and as a critic, and as a defender of genius through personal contact. The least that can be claimed of his poetry is that for over 50 years he was one of 3 or 4 best poets in writing in English. Throughout his childhood, adult life, and career, many would describe him as a village explainer, excellent if you were excellent if you were a village, but if you were not, not. Ezra was an elitist about who mattered as an artist and about what counted as art. He was a man who willingly devoted his entire life to advancing the art of poetry and maintaining his aesthetic standards while in a life of adversity. A bombastic galleon, palpably bound to or from the Spanish Main. Wyndham Lewis wrote about meeting Pound. Going on board, I discovered beneath its skull and crossbeams, intertwined with Flour's dailies and spattered with prosperous, star-spangled oddities, a heart of gold. You're done. How long is it?